Hello. Hello and welcome to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending from when you are tuning in. We know there are over 50 countries that are tuning in and about 200 participants. So thank you very much for your interest in this online high-level panel on gender diversity for a fair business environment. This event is organized by UNDP within the project Fair Business, or Promoting a Fair Business Environment in ASEAN, in partnership with the UK Government Prosperity Fund ASEAN Economic Reform Programme. My name is Liviana Zorzi. I'm project specialist on transparency and accountability. I would like to inform you that this event is recorded, and the recording will be shared with all those who registered and will be also uploaded in our YouTube channel at the end. Today, we will also launch officially the new report, Gender Diversity and Inclusion for a Fair Business Environment, which inspired our event today in celebration of the International Women's Day. So first of all, happy Women's Day, everybody. Our panel discussions will see three distinguished guests, and the discussion will be moderated by Ko Mia-hoi, our gender advisor at UNDP. After the moderated discussion, there will be a space for Q&A from the public. So we really encourage you to write down your questions for our speakers in the Q&A box that you find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. While you can use the chat box to maybe share your comments or any resource that you may share with the wider group. And now let's get started with the opening remarks. Unfortunately, due to a technical problem, our regional manager couldn't be here, but we have the opening remarks from Ko Mia-hoi, the gender advisor.
Thank you. Thank you, Liviana, and hello everyone, and happy International Women's Day to all women and men out there joining today's webinar. This year's International Women's Day's theme is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in the COVID-19 World. So we are here to commemorate this occasion with all of us together, and as well as hearing from the regional leaders promoting women's leadership and diversity and inclusion in the private sector. I want to thank the distinguished guests that joined us today to celebrate this important day, as well as the UK government's ASEAN Economic Reform Programme, who had been partnering with us over these years through the Fair Biz project. Promoting a Fair Business Environment in ASEAN is the full name of the project. Not only gender equal leadership and diversity and inclusion are a key component of good governance and business integrity, but they're also fundamental to achieving SDGs, especially SDG Goal 5 on gender equality, but also many other goals. We must also recognize that the pandemic has highlighted and in some cases exacerbated the ways in which these existing gender inequalities manifested. UNDP's global report indicated that women's employment is 90% more at risk than that of men. Even pre-pandemic in 2018, among the population outside of Malaysia's workforce, 2.9 million or 60.2% of women cited housework and family responsibilities as the main reason for not seeking work, compared with only 3.6% of men. Imagine how the challenges for women to excel to leadership positions have changed, given the likely additional burden and employment precarity during the pandemic. So even before the pandemic, women's leadership, it was difficult for women to achieve leadership positions, partly because of their unpaid work responsibility and partly because of many other reasons. But the pandemic made things worse for women. First, UNDP recognizes that this agenda is crucial to helping us build back better and build back differently, and achievement of SDGs over the next decade. This is why we promote and mainstream gender equality in our development work and seek to engage all stakeholders and build new partnerships with the private sector towards this end. We also recognize that a well-grounded ASEAN narrative around diversity and inclusion is important. I look forward to hearing from the panel and the discussion on the report we are launching today elaborate on how diversity and inclusion is good for business. Adds diversity of perspectives to tackle different business challenges, and company leadership reflective of brand consumer base should be able to better understand, deliver, and attract customers. To promote diversity and inclusion, we have to understand biased social norms and create more inclusive ones to ensure biased gender roles seeks to translate into missed opportunity for women and also for businesses. Almost 40% of women felt their communication and leadership styles were incompatible with the prevailing approach in their community's top management. It shows that how certain types of leadership preferred in the business sector are not coinciding with the way that women feel comfortable about their own leadership styles. It was also found that close to 50% of men believe they have the right to a job over women. So it's the privilege that they feel it still remains strong in our societies. So we have to work with the government to create an enabling environment by developing and implementing laws and policies that will safeguard equality and encourage employers to provide equal opportunity and equal pay regardless of gender. So this is not just an issue or responsibility of the private sector to bring diversity and inclusion to the business world. It is the entire society, including our government, responsibility to make it happen. We also have to encourage companies to establish organizational policies that foster inclusive workplace practices, so their women employees have the same prospect to take on leadership roles as their male employees. This is why the report that we are about to launch highlights good examples in the region to inspire others that this is possible in our own local context in ASEAN. I am delighted that today we have a group of highly recognized leaders in the business and government sector, promoting gender equality, inclusion, and diversity in the business sector. We have, in particular, I'd like to thank Kunruenwadi Suamongkon from Thailand, Mrs. Hati Tutan, and Ms. Angela Ju-Hyun Khan for joining us today to share their perspectives on how we can better improve our gender diversity and inclusion in the business environment. I'd also like to thank the UK government, particularly the Prosperity Fund's ASEAN Economic Reform Programme under the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office for supporting and guiding the work of UNDP in this area. And also like to thank our colleagues in different country offices UNDP in the region who have helped us research the important and critical data to make our evidence-based advocacy through the report we are about to launch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ko. Thank you for providing the opening remarks. Yeah, we are with the camera now. Thank you. Before giving the floor to our speakers and starting the discussion, I would like to briefly provide you an overview of the report. So, gender diversity and inclusion for a fair business environment. This has been the fruit of the hard work of almost a year of regional teams here in Bangkok, fair business and gender teams together with the colleagues throughout 5 countries in ASEAN. The countries that are covered by this report are Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And what we wanted to do here was really to build an ASEAN narrative. So we understand how the discourse of gender diversity has been key to advance business integrity and also to create a return on investment. This is really keeping up around the world, but there are not too many examples in ASEAN. So we went out and looked for these examples. We wanted really to start reflecting on how this is something that is making these communities in ASEAN more resilient and more able to protect themselves also against challenging times. I would like to show you a diagram in the next slide. This shows the 3 domains of exploration that we used in our analysis. There are these 3, let's say, areas that are deeply interconnected. There are social norms on one side, enabling environment, and organizational policies. And these reflect also the multiplicity of actors that are involved in this. So social norms reflect basically the views that are held on women's roles in the society, on their capabilities, and they really provide, reflect on the values, attitudes, and behaviors. Social norms are, of course, deeply interconnected also with the laws and policies and regulation. It means refers to the enabling environment. So this is in the realm of the governments and the public agencies. And normally these laws and policies reflect the social norms, but some other times they can also try to influence and change them. And for example, the governments can decide to push for changes in the social norms so that they can decide to push for laws and regulation that uphold and gender equality, that makes it easier also for companies, for women at work, to achieve their full potential, to break the barriers that maybe prevent them to advance in their career and to meaningfully contribute to their companies and to the community as a whole. And finally, we have the area of organizational policies. So this refers to the workplace environment and culture, and to the company policies that can really promote gender diversity and inclusion, and can even promote some changes in mindset and in culture. And what we wanted to show is that these 3 areas and these 3 actors are deeply interconnected, and companies can decide really to take an active role. They can be not only complying with what are the government regulations, but they can decide to take one or even many steps forward and even push and demand for further change. The other thing that I want to share with you is that in this report, you will find a lot of practical examples. So company policies and measures to address these issues that, if you think about, these are really issues related to business integrity. When we talk about business integrity, we are not thinking simply about anti-corruption and anti-bribery and this kind of compliance. Business integrity is a much wider concept, and it relates also to gender diversity and inclusion, to fight against discrimination. Everyone needs to be able to be treated fairly and to have the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to society. And these are some of the areas and the policies and measures that companies here in ASEAN are taking to enhance women leadership, to fight the gender-based pay gaps, for example, to ensure gender balance across roles and functions. This means an equal representation of men and women, even at the higher level of the companies, for example, at the board level, where still we are lagging behind in equal representation. It's also important to work on the language that we use within a company. So it's important to use inclusive and non-sexist language. And this, I find it is very much connected also to zero tolerance to sexual harassment, for example, and any other form of harassment, and making sure that people have also there are some whistleblowing mechanisms and redress mechanisms in place in the companies. This is another area that has become very popular lately is maybe the trying to improve the work-life balance. This has become very popular in this last year where we had to face the COVID-19 pandemic, and the working from home modality has really taken maybe everyone by surprise. And finally, in this report, you will find also a reflection on how gender-responsive policies and the prioritization of diversity and inclusion can even make companies more resilient and more able to respond to this crisis. Actually, we have seen that companies that have women sitting in their boards are 25% more profitable, according to a McKinsey study. So this is basically, in short, in a nutshell, what this report is about. We wanted to make it a practical tool, and we really hope that you will find it useful. We really hope that this will inspire other companies to take these ideas and share them and put them into practice. And now, without further ado, let me pass it to the moderator, our gender advisor who will invite the speakers to the floor. Thank you again.
Thank you, Liviana. And as I mentioned briefly in opening remarks, today we have three excellent leaders from three different countries in ASEAN and plus, because Korea is not. But we're all being very active in promoting gender equality, diversity and inclusion in ASEAN countries. So let me introduce the three speakers. Ms. Angela Joo-Hoon Kang is a founder and executive president of Global Competitiveness Empowerment Forum, promoting CSR, CSV, ESG, sustainability, and integrity with her 30 years of hybrid careers in public, private, and non-profit sectors, and a mid-career master's degree of public administration from Harvard Kennedy School. Angela wears multiple hats. Angela is currently an Integrity and Compliance Task Force member of 2021 Business 20 Italy, an anti-bribery policy group member of business at OECD, and senior advisor of Arabesque S-Ray, a global ESG data provider built in AI technology. Co-head of the South Korean delegation to 2021 Women 20 Italy. Angela is also a private sector advisor group member of UNDP's Fair Bit project, advising its diversity and inclusion platform. Previously, Angela was an Asia Pacific jury member of the Cartier Women's Initiative Award and a mentor for a female youth mentoring program appointed by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family of the Republic of Korea. Next, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Ha Thi Thun Tan from Vietnam. She is the chairperson and one of the founders of Deloitte Vietnam, where she's been holding leadership roles for the past 23 years. In addition, with over 38 years of experience in the field of audit and advisory, Mrs. Tan is a well-established leading figure in business forums and conferences, as well as organizations, associations, and networks advocating for gender equality, diversity, and inclusion at workplaces, in particular concerning women's rights and empowerment. Mrs. Tan's multiple hats include the Vice President of Vietnam Women Entrepreneurs Association and the Chairperson of Vietnam Business Coalition for Women's Empowerment. Mrs. Tan's enormous contribution to promoting women's empowerment and women's community-based businesses, social responsibility activities, startups, and more broadly, community development has led to positively influencing the business community as well as the future generations. Mrs. Tan was selected as one of the 50 most influential women in Vietnam by Forbes in 2017 and 2019, and awarded the Asia Pacific Entrepreneur Award by Enterprise Asia in 2017. And last but not least, let me introduce Kun Wadi Swammongkon from Thailand. She is the Secretary General of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Thailand. Prior to this appointment, she had served in several key positions at the Ministry of Justice, including Director General of the Legal Execution Department, Director General of the Probation Department, Inspector, Deputy Spokesperson, Deputy Director of the Office of Justice Affairs, and Deputy Director General of the Rights and Liberties Protection Department. It's not surprising that Kun Wadi also wears multiple hats. She is a member of the Public Sector Development Commission, the Office of the Public Sector Development Commission, member of the National Reform Committee on Public Administration, Director of the Bank for Agriculture and Agricultural Cooperatives, Director of Danarak Asset Development Company Limited, Director of the Law Reform Committee, the Office of the Council of State, Director of the Thailand Oil Palm Board, and advisor to the Committee on Economics, Monetary and Finance of the Senate. Kun Wadi obtained an LLB First Class Honours Gold Medal from Chulalongkorn University, Barrister at Law from the Institute of Legal Education Thai Bar Association, an LLM from Harvard Law School, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and an MBA from Walter A. Haas School of Business, University of California at Berkeley, USA. So thank you very much for this excellent lineup. And I would like to start asking questions. So first, if I may, I'd like to ask a question to Kun Wadi. Legal frameworks and government policies promoting gender equality are a prerequisite for workplace equality and for promoting women in private sector leadership positions. In March 2020, a memorandum of understanding was signed by the Thai government, private sector, and academic officials on promoting equality and eliminating unfair gender discrimination. Could you please elaborate, Kun Wadi, more on that MOU? Who was involved in the process? What was the government role? And are you seeing already some impact?
Thank you. Thank you, and Sawati. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Ms. Go, for a kind introduction. And I must say that it's quite an honor to be in this session on the very good day, Happy International Women's Day. And I have to thanks to the UNDP and the UK government and also the ASEAN Economic Recovery Reform Program for inviting me to share. As you asked, what about the MOU that we have signed? You hear me clearly? All right, okay. That's an initiative from the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security. What the aim of that MOU, or perhaps in Thailand, we call is a declaration in a way, to implement, to adopt the Gender Equality Act that we have enacted since 2015 to make on ground to everyone, every institution, every sector, to make sure that we have to promote equality and eliminate unfair gender discrimination. I think that go back almost before the COVID-19 pandemic, because the MOU or declaration have signed on the 2nd of March last year, and then shared by Deputy Prime Minister himself. This is torn from the top, the commitment from the government. As perhaps you're well aware, Thailand, if I may, quite well advanced in terms of ratification of international standard, principle, and instrument, and also to legalize into the domestic law. I think the two words that government have been adopted. One is promote possibility, and second, unlock potential. This is two key measures the Thai government have taken so far. So that on that day, I represent the Thai capital market in general. I think it aligns with the fair business environment, I sign on behalf of my office and also on behalf of the Thai capital market, together with other 24, on that day, 24, including ourselves, education institution, public sector, so on and so forth. And then I think that up to now, the numbers of signatories increased to 39. The basic of the declaration is quite simple. It's go make sure that language in the law be implemented in pragmatic way. This is quite simple on that. 6 items have been highlighted in the declaration. Everyone side have to observe and have to make things happen. One for sure, for recruitment, you can't say that you just recruit on the basis of gender, but you recruit on basis of qualification, education, and working background, so on and so forth, without specifying gender. Second, about dress code, quite simple, dress code. You have allowed personnel to get dressed according to their gender identity or sexuality, This is quite, I think, quite fair, And the third is about arranging areas suitable for number and restriction of person of gender identity also. Talking about perhaps very small items, right, restrooms, so on and so forth. You have to make sure that you have allocate the space in the workforce to accommodate that. And third is about a committee or board. You have to promote that you have to emphasize on equality. This one is in line with the SEC have been pushing forward from the corporate governance code since 2017, And the fifth about languages or the word, in the document have to prevent or display the sexual prejudice or disrespect the right and freedom of individual. And the last about the sexual harassment, you have to prevent and protect and to address on that and make sure that everyone understands about this. This is a 6 key, as I said, pragmatic, try to make sure that Gender Equality Act since 2015 be workable in a layman language, you see. Sometimes when you write the law, somehow it's the layman person do not understand. You have to spell out. So that I think that this declaration pretty much align with what we want to promote about gender equality. And Ms. Go, you asked what things happen. I think that's progress been here. For us, we draft write out the 2 guidelines for sure. One is about guideline on prevention on the sexual harassment within the SEC. And second, about to make sure the guideline on the recruitment is there. We don't specify on the gender on that. But among other things, we want also to promote this declaration or MOU amongst a listed company in addition to the corporate governance that have been issued already. I think I'd like to end my first round at the moment, please. Thank you.
Wadi, I think in many ways, this is a very progressive steps. These are very progressive steps. And I think the fact that it had everybody on the same page because of the nature of inclusiveness of the document is very impressive. And although I do think that similar efforts could be made within a single company, there's the importance of having the government taking the leadership role in pushing this type of agenda is critical in scaling the norms and standards for the rest of the country. So very much congratulations to Thailand. And I hope that this could be something that others can learn and follow. My next question is to Angela. And the question is, Women civil society movements and groups have always been a critical part advancing gender equality agenda. From the private sector coalition's perspective, how has the collective action approach been helpful in promoting the diversity and inclusion agenda beyond individual organizations? Are there any examples you can give on how this has influenced government's decisions to foster enabling environments through changes in laws and policies? So now we're trying to see the loop from the other end, led by coalitions and non-governmental groups to promote the gender equality agenda. Angela, please.
Thank you, Go, for your question and nice introduction. It's my great honor to join this panel with an excellent role model in ASEAN countries as an ASEAN plus speaker from South Korea. First of all, congratulations on the launch of the study report with the ASEAN narrative. A big applause to all the research team. The example of the Thailand is really encouraging. Let me share some more examples in governance and marketplace area. I found good examples in the report about the corporate governance standards promoting boardroom diversity as part of their agenda in Malaysia and Philippines, and in the efforts of the Malaysian chapter of the 30% Club and lead women director programs. The role of women's organizations cannot be overemphasized. Initiatives of Vietnamese Business Coalition for Women's Empowerment to enhance women's leadership in senior management is also notable as well, I think. The global average of boardroom diversity is about 21%. US is 30%. The average of the ASEAN 5 countries is 15%, 1-5. And then South Korea, unfortunately, is far low as 4.5% in the top 200 listed companies. So in South Korea, there was a meaningful change in boardroom diversity thanks to the multiple decades of the efforts of women's organizations. According to the amendment of the Financial Investment Services and Capital Markets Act from this year, the listed companies with more than 1.7 billion US dollars in assets are recommended, not required, but to appoint at least one female board member. Especially women business coalitions can also play an important advocacy role too for gender equality at the marketplace, to state leaders to influence government measures. For example, many delegates are business women and women entrepreneurs association to the Women 20, W20, the unofficial of the policy recommendation group of the women community in G20 countries, advocating for public and corporate policy change to promote market growth opportunities for women's economic empowerment is one of the key W20 policy agenda. The Women's Entrepreneurship and Finance Working Group that I'm also a member this year has been preparing public procurement summit with the International Trade Center, the joint body between WTO and UNCTAD. It will be great to imagine building a collaboration between G20 and then ASEAN countries. B20, Business 20, an official recommendation group of companies and business association in G20 countries, also put higher priority to women's economic empowerment, not only for increasing business opportunities, but also removing unfair business barriers. Especially last year, during the Saudi Arabian G20 presidency, B20 initiated a training project of large companies in their global supply chain for women entrepreneurs for their anti-corruption capacity building, about how to fight against unfair business practice at marketplace. It was meaningful to bridge B20 and then UNDP thanks to my dual role as B20 member and also private sector advisory group of the FairBiz project housed in UNDP Bangkok Regional Hub. And also I supported the FairBiz business project, the pilot project in Indonesia and Thailand, especially in Thailand. The FairBiz project team has been collaborating with the Federation of Business and Professional Women of Thailand by the gracious help of Dr. Soipet Lasonant, a renowned Thailand business leader with her dual positions of the Federation and also the Fair Business Project. So I hope the collaboration can become a really good example in ASEAN countries for capacity builder by the women business coalitions. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And I think the W20 example is particularly meaningful in the sense that it's actually women within the business sector creating women's movement. In the beginning of the sort of women's movement, women were looking in from peripheral to make change, to create a change in agenda. But I think it's the shift of the positioning of women's movement, not at the peripheral, but at the core of where the conversation is happening. I think it's a great example. And as you said, collaboration can also lead to further collaborations. And I think this is where we can also look for a stronger synergies and lasting results in pushing for the gender equality, diversity and inclusion agenda. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and insight. So my next question is to Mrs. Tan. So you are really speaking from the private sector, and just wanted to say that we have covered in our reports we just launched your company's example and translating your global D&I commitment to the local context in Vietnam. Now you have about 60% of all your staff and 40% of your senior leadership being women. Can you please share your firm's experience in ensuring global commitment can be implemented in a local context? How has Vietnam's social norms and existing legal or policy environment influenced this translation from the global to local implementation? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Mia Soy. Good afternoon, everyone from Hanoi, and good morning and good evening, depend where you are from the part of the world. Yes, this is my honor. This is really my great honor to join the webinar in sharing some information from a private sector perspective. You know, at Deloitte, we have been implement strategy, global strategy called All In. Over the past 3 years, in this global strategy for all diversity and inclusion and gender representation initiative cross countries member to demonstrate the Deloitte global commitment in creating the place where everyone can have the equal opportunity to contribute to the growth of the firm, to develop and success, and be the true self. Then at Deloitte also, we believe that we win when all are in. It's really the long strategy. We at a global level, we supposed to be to implement that for about from 6 years to 10 years. This global strategy also translates into member firm goals with a scorecard. We put on the what we call the KPI of the leadership to make sure that accountable for the leadership to focus and put all efforts in delivering our strategy, all-in strategy. In order for all-in strategy to be implemented successfully, it is the kind of, embedded in all areas of talent, with the proper communication and eminence in building, as you may see in my my slide here, from the starting with the hiring. Then we have the very clear strategy for promotion and succession and experience and exposure and inclusive leadership. That's the communication and eminence that consistently from one to other country members within the Southeast Asia and also in other regions. In addition, in Vietnam, you may see also in a slide, we are very first private company in Vietnam awarded the S certificate. That is a global assessment and business certificate for gender equality to reconfirm that in Vietnam and in other countries to reconfirm our commitment for this initiative of promoting we call DNI, diversity and inclusion. For the best practice in we all in all country members, we have flexible working policies implemented cross office, cross country member to enable flexible working, not only flexible working times, but also flexible working place. For those needed, especially for working women, for working parents, we also implemented what we call, you may see here, the employee assistance program, where we invited the external consultant or coach to provide the service to improve the wellness of our staff whenever they are facing or have any challenging both work and life. Especially for women, we ensure the gender balance, not only in general, but also gender balance at leadership role. Especially we have the program we design only for women, we call women's leading age, where the women have the early recognize their potential to be up to the leadership level. Then they have a special coaching and training program to support and assist them a long way for them to up to leadership role. It's really consistent from one to other office, one to other country member. Then we kind of proud of Deloitte country level, regional level, and global. We have very high women at management level and at top leadership level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tan. And I think that actually the linkages between the global and local context made it even stronger for your strategy to work. And I hear that communication or communicating the messages to everyone is very critical. Everybody needs to be on the same page. And I think that reminded me of the response from Khun Ranwadi as well. Thank you for sharing this very strategic approach that your company has taken to promote gender equality, diversity, and inclusion. Now we're moving to the round 2, and I would be asking again Khun Ranwadi. Khun Ranwadi, could you please share how the Thai SEC is helping to create an enabling environment for gender equality and inclusion in Thai listed companies? Are there any other complementary initiatives you would like to highlight?
Okay, thank you for the question. You hear me clearly? Yes?
Yes, thank you.
All right, to answer to your question, I'd like to begin with the evidence base. I think that many studies reveal that the greater gender diversity on board, this will benefit business in the long run. I think that many studies already identify that, the more diversity you have, the mid-terms or long-term profitability will be there. And I think that, as I said early on in the first round, that the Thai SEC back in 2017 issued voluntary statement of corporate governance code, CG code, to encourage listed company to consider to have the diversity on board. Not only educational background, but talking about gender and age diversification on that, gender diversification. And also, I think that up to now, I must say, I think that is quite clearly, I think that Angela mentioned early on too, that Thailand, at the moment, we have about 22% of the women on board of the total 700 up listed company. Again, my colleague and I think that there is a room for improvement to push ahead on that, I think that for this, I have to tell you, Ms. Go, that for Thailand, we adopt the so-called ESG strategy, environment, social, and corporate governance strategy. Right now, we also take a strategy in compliance not only for UN SDG, but also UNGP on the business and human rights. So that we focus on how to convince all the companies to recognize the benefit of this. We take approach voluntary rather than mandatory. I think that these have to come from the willingness of the company themselves. And right now we are talking about, we have a plan and an aim, quite ambitious one, Ms. Go. 1 year from now, we must say that we will encourage at least 1/3 of the board must be women of the total listed company. I don't say that I put this as a KPI, we have to look at the supply side as well, so that now we work together with all related parties, how to cultivate, how to motivate, and how to create a pool of potential women for company to select as executives on the board, You can't just say outright that you want this and that, but you have to look ecosystem all around. If we have potential pool of potential women as a potential supply, I think that it would benefit the company themselves too. And we would support financially on the what call tuition fee, because if you want anyone to be in the club, you have to make sure you set what support well enough on that. We work along with this. And like last week, Ms. Go and all the audience, we kick off the very first we call women CEO in capital market dialogue. This is the first kick-off as the first time. I must say that I take benefit, not advantage for sure, benefit of being the first female Secretary General of the Thai SEC. I must maximize the time I'm here, how to empower more and more to the Thai women. And luckily, we get well accepted from the high level. This is the decision maker of women of about 24 persons, And this morning we put in a big newspaper on this. They come and they share. We set a network. They're talking about we have to confident them ourselves. So-called like Kun Bill mentioned about unbiased. We have to eliminate that and be confident that we can do no matter who we are, no matter gender, what we have, so on and so forth, And at the end, they totally agree that the plan that SEC want to have is quite reasonable, and they would help us to be coaching as well. You see, because those prominent, those successful women CEO from time to time becomes a role model of the young Thai women now. They said that they volunteer and would contribute whatever step that ACC would take from now on. This is the initiative lately that we do. And another thing, Ms. Go, I think that talking about financial literacy, that women in every part of the world, especially in Thailand, they are the one who keep our money and do the domestic accounting and so forth. SEC right now want to empower the vulnerable group of the people, the women, perhaps in the suburb area or the rural area. How would they, she would have a basic understanding about accounting if they want to be SME, because I think if you look around about SME entrepreneur worldwide, most of them are led by women, so that we would keep this online training, and then also the whatever tutorial, whatever class to those women and also girls in the elementary school, primary school. I think this is a latest activity or things that we have done so far, and along with what we say that we want to put forward on ESG agenda on this, and also the human right, and to recognize the gender equality and minimize whatever drawback that he or she would have to empower all the women. Thank you.
Thank you, Khun Renwati. And it's remarkable that your approach has not been imposing the agenda to private sector companies, but you're more like you're soliciting willingness from companies within to get on board with the gender diversity and inclusion agenda, and you have been successful. And I think this is remarkable. And I also find that your last point about supporting women in rural areas with their financial literacy development is critical. And apparently in Asia, on Pacific, every 10 young men starting businesses, 9.7 women starting businesses. So they're more or less gender parity there, but the success journey is very different for men and women. And by giving that skills that are required to develop their businesses at the very beginning to women who may have been further left behind, I think it's very, very impressive. And I see that potential of scaling from there for women business owners in Thailand. I also note that leadership is critical. You are strategically leveraging your leadership positions to create the next generation of women leaders. And I see that this is also an element that we need to keep in mind, how important this is for the gender equality and diversity agenda. We need women leaders for the next generation of women leaders as well. So thank you. Now, I'd like to move to Mrs. Tan for the next question, focusing more on transparency. So transparency is a key aspect of corporate governance and should be mirrored in D&I practices. For instance, in order to translate D&I commitment into real action and impact, companies should establish targets, monitor progress, and communicate results. For example, a gender parity strategy with concrete targets and monitoring benchmarks can support corporate governance when communicated openly to employees, while increasing the effectiveness of the strategy to achieve gender parity. In Deloitte, Vietnam, how the corporate governance is linked to gender diversity and inclusion agenda. Over to you, Mrs. Tan, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for very interesting questions. So Deloitte, we are not listed company or not public company. We are the consulting and advisory company. Then we have kind of a big picture when we see about how D&I in linking with the corporate governance as well as for sustainability business growth. To follow with what Khun Suwan Mongko mentioned about the how important the women roles for listed and public company when they have the roles in the board. So here in Vietnam, we have three things. One is the currently we see in Deloitte report with the report called the women in boardroom. So we see the women in boardroom in Vietnam is very low. Then women at top leadership at the boardroom also not very high. So overall for Asia, that only 7.8% board seats held by women, and only 2.6% board chair are women, and 4.5 of the SP 500 company CEO are women. So we see that at the middle level, management level, we have higher percentage, and it's keep increasing year by year, not rapidly, slowly, but at top leadership is still somewhere there. The questions that how the communication and transparency in terms of the company strategy and for company strategy at top leadership is still question. The question. And the second thing is very important. We think that we have the questions is how women can be supported and involved in the board. To accelerating to the leadership role for today. You may see in my slide. It's very much we need to focus on the key gender values. For example, you see that in stereotype and social norm, when talking about women values, they always talking about the other side with the weight, with the very dependent, family-oriented, and lack of accessiveness, caring, partnership, emotional, but very much to make sure that the women to stand up and support for D&I culture or working environment is really, we need to focus on gender. It's very important to recognize the gender values. It's always women also very confident, be very caring, generous, empathy, but very patient. And it's really the what we call the leadership in the patient. Then we see for last couple of years with the crisis of the COVID, and also in Vietnam we have another little bit crisis before. We see that the company have more women sit in the board or have the under the women leadership at the execution level. I can say that they kind of respond to the risk better than the other company. So that's very important thing. So I am also now is the chairperson of what we call Vietnam Business Coalition for Women Empowerment. This is really the organization. It just established. It's just about 3 years. And we have a very clear mission to connect all business or enterprises to commit, achieve the gender equality at workplace. So make sure that at workplace, not just about the top leadership, thought, and very much we look at the the company working policy to make sure that the company to create equal, we say that equal and happy working environments wherever women and also men has the same working environment where they happy and fair enough for them to contribute to the company. This is a really inspire. That also another side we say inspire the implementation, the goals of increase what we call the women's economic right in Vietnam. So when women, we have more economic rights, so we more confidence, and then we have more freedom in working and making decisions. In the same time, it's still taking care of the family. So I think the most important to say that at Deloitte in particularly, so it's really the recognize the gender values and make sure the gender values put in the right place, in the right working environment, so then D&I can become not only the culture, but also the values of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tan, and thank you for reminding us that gender diversity and inclusion is not just a matter of the leadership positions, but in all teams at all levels, and it influences every man and woman in a company. And also the notion that what may have been considered a negative thing about women, actually positive, is very good point. So thank you. I move to Angela for the next question. You may have noted that in our report, we suggest that an organizational culture that embraces gender diversity and gender equal leadership is also likely to enable the improvement in ESG standards. What is your view in this regard? Which linkages do you see between diversity and inclusion and business integrity?
Thank you. As Liviana said initially of this event, the business integrity is beyond corporate compliance. They can promote not only for a fair business environment, but also D&I and gender equality. Since ESG investing criteria include diversity and inclusion, boardroom diversity, and then fair business practices, it can be said that there are complementary and then virtuous interrelations among the D&I and business integrity from the holistic perspective of ESG. However, I would like to say that there are opportunities but also challenges. Let me talk about the opportunities side first, from global, regional, country, and then company level. First, global. As Ko, you introduced me in my bio. I'm a senior advisor of Arabesque, a global ESG data research provider. And Arabesque published its latest research result from more than 2,000 companies around the world. That diversity companies demonstrate not only better financial performance, but also greater transparency, such as disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions. So since I'm a senior advisor about Arabesque for South Korean business development, I think that D&I could increase this openness and flexibility and agility, the important competitive advantages of ESG. I think it can be this very compelling messages to companies, so that diversity and inclusion agenda can become a strong internal voluntary driver, not a reluctant mandatory external driver. Second, in ASEAN, there are 5 thematic platforms in the Fair Biz project funded by UK and housed in UNDP Bangkok Regional Hub. The 5 platforms are procurement, supply chain, ESG, D&I focusing on gender and on youth entrepreneurship. So synergies among business integrity, D&I, and ESG can be increased more under the FairBiz project supporting ASEAN countries in the future. Third, country level, I already mentioned earlier that many progresses in Thailand by the FairBiz project. In Indonesia, the FairBiz project has been building the partnership with the Alliance for Integrity, the ODA development agency from Germany, and Women in Integrity, WIN, for business integrity capacity building for women entrepreneurs in public procurement, which will empower them to cope with unfair business practice and also D&I agenda. So this is also one of notable example that we would like to see in the future for more impact and outputs and outcome. And then in South Korea, for ESG investing, the National Pension Fund will increase ESG investing up to 50%, half of these assets by next year. 2 months ago, the Korea Exchange announced the ESG disclosure guidance and aims to recommend a voluntary disclosure by 2025 and require a mandatory disclosure from 2030. So it's kind of like an incremental plan. So I hope to see a local, even gender diversity index ETFs in the future someday. Last but not least, company level, we heard that the excellent example of Deloitte Vietnam and also in Thailand earlier. So another notable example that I found in the report is Maybank promoting the D&I agenda by allocating its 10% of a company's scorecard indicators. So lastly, this is, the top part. What would be the challenges? Rigid hierarchy-based and male-dominated social norms could be difficult hurdles. Public policy change may be hard, but possible at least, even though it takes a long time. But the gap between regulation and practice in the business environment of companies may be a substantial challenge in many areas. So for example, South Korean companies began to appoint female board directors, but many come from outside. So I think there is a long way to go to see more female board directors from inside. As you all know, a whistleblower of Enron, one of the largest the corrupt corporate scandal, was a woman. So I hope to see a virtuous cycle of D&I agenda, business integrity, and then S and then G of ESG, so that we can see more women CEOs, CFOs, and chief compliance officers in the boardrooms for more positive corporate culture change, and then transparency, and then most of all, financial performance. Thank you.
OM, I'd like to invite Ambassador to say a few words before we move to the third round of questions. High Commissioner, Ms. Kara OM, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I didn't hear any of the things that you were saying when you just came back in, Ms. Go. So if I miss anything, please tell me before I finish up. So first of all, I'm really, really pleased to be here. It's really lovely to see Ruanbody Swangmokot again. We've been on panels together before. And to be back with UNDP talking about gender issues on International Women's Day. I have to be honest that I really first became very conscious of International Women's Day when I was in Vietnam. I think there's a much stronger tradition there than there is in my own country for marking International Women's Day. It was at the time I was there, which was in between 2005 and 2009, it started as a way of marking female contribution, and often I was given a rose or something by being a female. But by the time I left, it was really a brilliant excuse for us to get together and talk about gender inclusion issues. So I'd like to thank Vietnam for helping introduce me to this tradition. The UK government attaches huge importance to our collaboration with UNDP through FairBiz and this project, the Prosperity Fund on ASEAN Economic Reform, to advance the diversity and inclusion agenda. Diversity and inclusion are key features of good corporate governance. I was really struck by what Angela was saying there, that actually, if you have the companies that tend to have better inclusion policies around gender, also often you will find them being much better on other aspects of ESG as well. So on the governance side, on the environmental reporting side, and also on overall business integrity. A fair business environment can only be achieved if we can succeed in removing the barriers that women and other marginalised groups face to access and thrive in the workplace, to progress in their careers and to reach decision-making levels in their organisations. We have heard already, and I have been quoting these kinds of statistics since I first saw the linkage through research, that diversity and inclusion is not only the right thing to do, but it makes really good, hard business sense. Companies scoring higher on gender diversity in executive teams are seen to be 25% more profitable than those that do not prioritise this agenda. And that came from the McKinsey report that I'm sure we have all pored over. There is really compelling research demonstrating the linkages between gender diversity in senior leadership roles and board level with tangible benefits for companies. And there's also growing evidence to establish the connection between gender balanced representation in managerial roles and boards with stronger corporate governance and transparency right across the board. Often this narrative has stemmed from large multinationals, and sometimes I think it has lacked stories or felt a little bit culturally distant from some of the places we are working. And it's really important, I think, as with all kinds of role modelling, that you can find narratives that sound really relevant to homegrown companies in Asia. And I think that is the novelty of the report that we're going to be launching today. It's precisely because it has this regional focus in a way that is feels both inspiring and really, really relevant. There's a plethora of examples collected that all refer to companies in ASEAN, and we hope they can inspire more and more businesses to follow in their footsteps. I think it's been evident from what panel members have been saying today, redefining diversity and inclusion landscape in ASEAN with a vision for building a fairer, more resilient, if ever we needed to be reminded of our need to be resilient. I think this year has really shown us that, and prosperous community. It's a shared responsibility. Everybody has a role to play. Governments have a role to play. I think the way Ms. Wampadi Swanmakol talked about the legislation that is put in place and what government organisations have done, those are really inspiring examples. Companies, in the way that Mrs. Tang and Angela have spoken about, business associations, civil society, everybody's got a role to play. Actions can be taken to promote social norms in support of gender diversity and inclusion, and to build a favourable enabling environment to influence corporate culture and individuals and set up organisational policies and practices. I was really struck by the testimony that we had today, that every panel member had something to say about kind of organisational practices. It could be based in law or it could be company policy that not only eased all of the kind of HR machinery, if you like, that we experience within our organisations, but also that really tried to get to the heart of challenging some of the cultural norms that are unhelpful and work in opposition sometimes to inclusion of all types and particularly of gender. We're really pleased to see the high level of participation in this event. There's really good numbers. The panel members are really striking in their seniority and their engagement in this agenda. And we really think that events like this can seed and bear fruit in coming months. We've seen the willingness to learn from each other. I've taken away a few ideas that I'm going to be putting to my organisation, and to share experiences, expand networks across ASEAN countries. Through FairBiz, and particularly its diversity and inclusion platform, we've managed not only to raise awareness of the linkages between gender and business integrity, thanks to events like this, but also the report itself, but to engage with a variety of companies on the ground. For example, we laid the foundations for a project that will soon be piloted in Thailand in cooperation with Federation of Business Professional Women in Thailand. We'll share with you the details of this story in future events, and please keep connected to the FairBiz platform. I am delighted, if I can say now, if it's possible for me to say now, how great it is to have all of the speakers with us. Ramvadi Swan McCall, Ha Thi Thu Tang, Angela Ju Kyung Hyun Kang, Jacob Silius, everybody from UNDP, Liviana, Ko, Pundari, Ling, all of the people in the national teams that have been helping us pull this together. The researchers that brought together such brilliant locally grounded insights into the report, and the companies who are really showing, like some of the ones represented today, who are showing real leadership within the region and globally on the D&I agenda. We've got to really make sure that this kind of best practice that we've shared today and in the report doesn't fade after International Women's Day, but that we find a way to make sure that they become mainstreamed and carried forward with us. Thank you very much.
Kara, and also really succinctly emphasizing the messages that have been shared with the guest speakers, eminent speakers, may I say. Audience and speakers, we were hoping to touch upon the experiences of the COVID-19 crisis a little bit, but due to the time constraint, we would defer this to probably in future opportunities where we will have to reflect on this experience, because unfortunately the crisis continues to influence our lives today, and we must take stock of our experiences later as well. So with your permission, I'd like to move to the questions from the audience, and I'm now asking Liviana to share the questions that have been posed by the audience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ko. Thank you very much. So I think we have 3 questions that I can share, and I guess maybe we don't have time to have every speaker respond to all of them, but maybe each speaker can pick one question to reply to. So the first question is, despite the effort by the organizations to promote and support women to advance in the business environment, especially in leadership role, it seems that there are still much fewer women than men in leadership positions. What do panel members think are the obstacles, for example, cultural expectation, norms, etc.? And how can the organization, how can the employers help women overcome with these obstacles? This is one question. The second question is, what are some measures that can be placed by governments or companies to increase the accountability for inclusion and diversity? And the third question is, any advice from panel members' experiences to women on how they pave their way to a leadership role? So your personal advice. So who would like to start first responding to any of these questions?
I don't know if I may. Can I touch
yes,
upon
sure.
that? Thank you. The 3 questions, but I think I don't have time to answer all. But third, last question in the advice, I think that, as I said early on, be confident that you can do, no matter what. And you have to perform, make commitment and show the colleagues that you can take charge in every assignment, so on and so forth. And last but not least, lifetime learning. You have to cultivate yourself and be reskilled and make sure you acquainted with all the digital now, no matter what, like that. Okay, this is my sharing. Thank you.
Should I get something? It's from the private sector and make it more what we say, the practitioner. I think the company should have the practice to learn and to share to each other, especially from private sector. Not only focus on in Vietnam with where from my personal experience. I think that its focus on the public and listed company is very important, and they have certain requirement from the capital market. But majority company in Vietnam are small and medium size, especially for the company leading by women, also small and medium size. So the company should have support, share the practice, and focus on two things, which is I see the success not only from Deloitte but also from others. Private company is the the company should have the properly working policy, flexible working hour to support women. So in the past, when we're talking about flexible working policy, is very much again talking about the time. But now with the impact by COVID, so everyone know that it should be summed up as a flexible working place. So where women and men together can work to support for the family, and also the proper program to support for women to grow their career path. And the second again, with what I can see in Vietnam, should raise awareness of women values to make themselves more confident and equal at workplace. Thank you.
Yeah, let me also share my reflection that I mean, there is a saying that there are two myths. One myth is women talk too much. The other myth is I'm from ASEAN +3, especially East Asia. It's regarded as a, I mean, like a not so good example that if the subordinate can challenge the boss. I remember, you know, like classrooms in Asia, especially in my country, Southeast Asia, when professors or teachers, oh, please ask a question, and then if some of the students ask question, and then at the end of, I mean, professors and teachers feel that they are kind of challenging their authority. But in Western culture, actually, if I mean, without any response or question, that means that you didn't pay attention. So whenever I hear in Western, you know, surrounding that, thank you for your contribution, that I recall that, oh, it's different in my home country environment. So actually in corporate environment, I would like to emphasize to the women working in business or any organization that please demystify this myth, and then talk much, and then also challenge your boss. I think it's a way of like you know, the contributing the company's or organization culture.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. I think now the time is over, but It has really been great to have been with us discussing, and I would like to thank again also Her Excellency, the British High Commissioner, for staying with us for the whole time. I also thank our regional manager, Jaco, that in the end, he could come in and solve his matter pretty much early, but not early enough for the speech, so thank you. Jaco.
No, just to say thank you, and it was great being on the panel. Sorry that my technical glitches didn't allow that, but thank you, colleagues.
Finally, I just want to really reiterate, I'm really glad that we managed to have this event on such an important day, International Women's Day, and having managed to launch this report today has been really, really nice. We really hope that through the project, we also manage to build this community of women that lead and drive the change. And probably we can find out new ways in which women business leaders, for example, can build a culture of integrity and can make companies more resilient and more fit for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is really what we think. I want also to invite you to please share your feedback with us. So you can scan the QR code or click or use the link and fill in our survey. It really takes 2 minutes or even less. And also we share again the link to the report. So with this, thank you again very much also to my colleagues in the country offices who work hard with us to make this happening. Thank you to the speakers and to my team and Ko, Pundari, Link, Luciana, Radhika, everybody. Thank you again and see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
So do we close? To close the camera.